Have you ever had a conversation that left you unexpectedly moved, caught you completely off guard, and made you rethink someone you thought you knew? Today, I want to share one of those rare moments from my life, a moment that began on a sunny afternoon in the university garden with my daughter's boyfriend standing nervously across from me. I'd love to know, from which cities are you watching us today? Drop a comment below, and if you enjoy this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us share more real-life stories like this one. Now, let's dive in. It was a Saturday, and the university campus had a soft, quiet energy that I always found soothing. The kind of calm where the sunlight falls just right, filtering through the leaves and casting a golden pattern on the brick pathways. I was sitting on one of the wrought iron benches in the garden, sipping a cup of coffee I had grabbed from the nearby cafe. The smell of blooming flowers mingled with the faint aroma of fresh-cut grass. It was the perfect setting to clear my mind after a week of meetings, deadlines, and life's usual chaos. I noticed him approaching almost immediately. Peter, my daughter's boyfriend, walking toward me with his hands stuffed awkwardly in his jacket pockets. There was something in his gait that made me pause, a subtle stiffness, a nervous energy that I hadn't expected. He stopped a few feet away, hesitated, and then offered a small, unsure smile. "Hi, Mrs. Whitman," he said, his voice slightly shaky. I gestured for him to sit, though the bench wasn't particularly large. "Hello, Peter. How's your week going?" He perched on the edge, looking around as if the garden itself might offer him some courage. "It's been okay. Busy. But I wanted to talk to you, actually." His words tumbled out quickly, almost spilling over each other, as if he were afraid I might change my mind and walk away. I set my coffee down and turned to face him more directly, curious. "Talk to me? About what?" He took a deep breath and looked at the ground for a moment before meeting my gaze. I wanted to say thank you for trusting me with her. I know I'm not always the easiest person to understand, and I don't want to mess things up." There it was, the vulnerability in his voice, the honesty. I felt my initial surprise give way to a warmth I hadn't expected. Peter, who I had only seen in bits and pieces, standing nervously, trying so hard to communicate respect and sincerity. It was disarming in the most human way. "You don't need to say that," I said softly. "I know she cares about you. That's what matters to me, but I appreciate you saying it." He shifted on the bench, rubbing the back of his neck. Sometimes I feel like I need to prove myself, you know. Not to you, exactly, but I want you to see that I really care about her, and I want to do right by her." I nodded slowly, watching a leaf drift down from the maple tree above us. The breeze made it spin gently before landing on the path. It struck me how much this small, ordinary moment mirrored the careful attention he wanted to give my daughter. Deliberate, considerate, and a little anxious, but full of genuine intent. "You're doing fine, Peter. Honestly, just being sincere is more than enough," I said. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and he smiled, a real one this time, not the hesitant attempt from before. "Thanks. That means a lot to hear." We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the campus life carry on around us. Students walked by, some laughing, some absorbed in conversation, others lost in thought. But for that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the bench, the sunlight, and the quiet rhythm of our exchange. It wasn't what I expected when I saw him approaching, and yet, in that unplanned conversation, something shifted. There was a mutual understanding that didn't need elaborate words. It was simple, honest, and deeply human. And I realized, as he began to talk about his hopes for the future, for school, and for his time with my daughter, that this nervous young man had more depth than I had allowed myself to see before. When he finally stood to leave, the tension in his posture had eased, and there was a lightness to his step. "Thanks again for letting me sit with you," he said. "Anytime," I replied, smiling. "Come back when you want to talk again." As he walked away, I stayed on the bench a little longer, letting the sunlight warm my shoulders, thinking about how small gestures and honest words can quietly change your perspective. Sometimes it's the unexpected moments, the conversations we never planned to have, that leave the deepest mark. And that day in the university garden, I felt exactly that. A subtle, gentle shift in how I saw someone I thought I already knew. It was the start of an experience I hadn't anticipated, one that would grow in significance over the days and weeks to come. A few days after our conversation in the garden, I found myself thinking about Peter more than I expected. Not in any worrying way, just thoughtfully. There was something about the honesty in his words, the nervous but sincere way he had tried to communicate, that lingered with me. I realized that I hadn't had a conversation like that in a long time, one that wasn't about work, responsibilities, or obligations, but simply about connecting, understanding, and being seen. It was late afternoon when I returned to the garden, my coffee in hand again, the sunlight softer now, dappled through the branches like golden lace. I settled onto the same bench and let myself relax. The campus was quieter this time, the students having mostly left, and only a few late wanderers moved along the paths. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened to the faint rustle of leaves and distant laughter from the student center. I wasn't expecting anyone, but then I noticed Peter walking toward me again. His steps were hesitant, slower than before, as if he were rehearsing what he might say. He waved softly when he saw me, and I returned the gesture with a smile. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice steadier than last time, but still carrying that same subtle tension. "Of course," I said. I was just enjoying the quiet. He sat beside me carefully, not too close, but not too far either. There was a rhythm to the way he moved, as if he were trying to find the right balance between comfort and respect. For a few minutes we sat in silence, simply sharing the space and the calm of the garden. Finally, he spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about being sincere and not needing to prove myself." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "I realize I've been so worried about appearances, about doing everything perfectly, that I sometimes forget the simple things, like actually listening or just being present." I nodded, sensing the depth of his reflection. "It takes courage to notice that about yourself," I said. "Most people don't take the time to step back and see how they're showing up for the people they care about." He glanced at me, and for a moment there was an unspoken understanding between us. I felt as if I was seeing a side of him that was usually reserved only for my daughter, a glimpse of the thoughtful, introspective part of him that most people might overlook. "I guess I want to be someone she can rely on," he admitted. "Someone who's consistent, who she can trust even when things get hard." His eyes met mine, steady but earnest. And I realized that starts with being honest with myself too. There was something quietly moving about hearing him speak like this. Not because it was dramatic or theatrical, but because it was real. Vulnerable in the way only young people trying to grow can be. It reminded me of the early days of my own relationships, the careful navigation of trust and respect, and the deep satisfaction that comes from connecting authentically with another human being. We spent the next hour talking about his classes, his aspirations, the challenges he faced balancing school and work. I listened, offering encouragement where I could, but mostly just letting him talk. The nervousness that had marked our first conversation had melted into a more grounded, thoughtful energy. He seemed lighter somehow, freer, as if admitting these things out loud had eased a burden he didn't fully realize he was carrying. As the sun began to dip behind the treetops, casting long shadows across the garden, Peter stood up. "I should probably get going," he said, a hint of reluctance in his voice. I smiled warmly. "I understand, but I'm glad you stopped by today. It's nice to talk like this." He nodded, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he turned to leave, walking slowly down the path, hands in pockets, eyes occasionally glancing back. I stayed on the bench a little longer, feeling a gentle sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the honesty we'd shared, the connection that had formed, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the most meaningful moments in life are unplanned and simple. As I left the garden myself, the crisp air filled my lungs, and I felt a subtle shift in perspective. I realized that these encounters, the small, deliberate acts of listening and speaking from the heart, had a way of changing not just how we see others, but how we see ourselves. And I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would unfold in ways none of us could yet predict. It was a few weeks later when I found myself running into Peter again, though this time it wasn't planned. I was walking across the campus on a crisp, slightly windy morning, my scarf wrapped loosely around my neck, thinking about errands I needed to run later. The leaves had begun turning shades of amber and crimson, drifting lazily along the pathways, and there was a quiet energy in the air that hinted at the change of seasons. Peter appeared from behind a cluster of maples, carrying a stack of books and looking slightly flustered. He caught my eye and smiled, but there was a different kind of tension in his posture than before, not the nervousness of uncertainty, but the subtle weight of responsibility. "Mrs. Whitman," he called softly, approaching. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Good morning, Peter," I replied, stepping aside to let him pass. "You look busy." He laughed lightly, a sound that carried just a hint of exasperation. "I am. Papers, projects, and trying to keep everything on track. But I wanted to catch you before classes started. There's something I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind." I gestured to the bench nearby, inviting him to sit. The morning sunlight fell in golden streaks across the campus lawn, and the air was brisk but refreshing. It felt like one of those moments where the world slows down just enough for a meaningful conversation to unfold. He sat carefully, resting the books on the bench beside him. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the last time we talked," he began. "About being honest and present, and how that builds trust. And I realized that I've been carrying this fear of disappointing people, my parents, my friends, even your daughter sometimes." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I think most of us carry that fear, in one way or another. It's part of learning how to grow." He looked at me, his eyes steady now, more composed than the first day he had approached me. "I know I can't control everything, and I've been trying too hard to. But talking with you, both times, it helped me see that it's not about being perfect. It's about being thoughtful, being willing to reflect on your actions and their impact." There was a quiet sincerity in his voice that made me pause. I could see the young man I had known before, but now there was a calm confidence beneath the surface nervousness. It reminded me of watching my own daughter grow into someone thoughtful and compassionate, and suddenly I understood that Peter's journey wasn't just about him. It was part of a larger process of how people mature, navigate relationships, and learn empathy. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "It takes courage to acknowledge your fears and still show up. Most people shy away from that kind of honesty." He gave a small, reflective smile. "I've also realized that asking for guidance, listening to advice, it's not a weakness. It's part of growing. And I wanted to thank you for listening the other day, and today too. It's helped me a lot more than I expected." I felt a warmth spreading in my chest. It wasn't a dramatic or overwhelming emotion, but a gentle recognition that sometimes the simplest human interactions carry profound significance. "I'm glad, Peter. Truly. It's rewarding to see someone willing to be thoughtful, to reflect, and to act with integrity." We sat in silence for a while after that, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of campus life. The connection between us had become quiet, understated, but undeniably present, a shared space of trust, understanding, and mutual respect. As he finally stood to leave, he paused for a moment. I know I don't say it often, but thank you. Not just for today, but for everything. It's rare to find someone willing to just talk and listen without judgment. You're welcome, Peter, I said, smiling. And remember, learning, growing, and reflecting is a lifelong process. You're on the right path. He nodded, eyes meeting mine one last time before he walked away down the leaf-strewn path. I watched him go, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the small but meaningful steps he was taking. The garden, the benches, the sun filtering through the trees, all of it had become part of a subtle, unfolding story of growth, trust, and understanding. As I turned to leave myself, the crisp morning air felt sharper, fresher. I realized that these moments with Peter, simple and heartfelt as they were, had given me something too, a renewed sense of patience, empathy, and appreciation for the quiet ways people can connect and evolve together. And I knew deep down that this journey wasn't just his. It was ours, in a sense, shaped by conversations, attentiveness, and the willingness to truly see each other. A few weeks later, I found myself walking through the university garden once again, this time in late afternoon. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold, and the crisp autumn air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves. It had been a season of subtle change, in the trees, in the weather, and quietly, in the relationships I had been observing and nurturing from a distance. I wasn't expecting anyone, yet as I rounded the familiar path lined with benches, I spotted Peter sitting alone, books beside him, looking contemplative. He looked up as I approached and gave a small, tentative wave. I smiled and joined him on the bench. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. "Not at all," he replied, his voice calm even. There was a comfort now in our interaction, a rhythm that had formed over our previous meetings. He had shed the stiffness of those first encounters, yet there remained a quiet thoughtfulness, a care in the way he chose his words. It was clear he had grown, not just in confidence, but in emotional awareness, in the way he related to others. For a few minutes, we simply watched the garden. The late sun filtered through the trees, casting intricate shadows across the brick pathway. The faint sound of distant laughter from students studying or walking home filled the background, but it felt removed, almost like a gentle hum beneath the stillness of our space. Finally, Peter spoke. "I wanted to stop by because, well, I wanted to share something with you. I think about our conversations a lot. They helped me more than I expected. And I feel different now. More aware, more patient, more intentional." I turned to him, sensing the sincerity in his words. "I can see that, Peter. You carry yourself differently now. Thoughtful, grounded, and it's clear you're reflecting on the ways you want to live and relate to the people around you." He looked down at his hands, then back up, eyes meeting mine with quiet intensity. "It's not just about my relationship with your daughter," he admitted. "It's about understanding myself. Learning how to communicate, how to listen, how to handle the parts of life I used to rush past. And you've shown me that being open, honest, and patient matters more than I realized." I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for any grand gesture, but for the simple, honest human connection that had taken root. "It's rare to meet someone willing to reflect and grow like that," I said softly. "You're doing more than just thinking about your actions. You're considering their impact. That's maturity." A gentle smile spread across his face, not the nervousness of before, but something calmer, steadier. "Thank you. Truly. And I wanted you to know that I respect how you've welcomed these conversations. It means a lot." We fell into a quiet rhythm after that, speaking in soft, reflective tones about life, ambitions, and the small lessons we encounter along the way. It wasn't dramatic or earth-shattering, but it was profoundly real. The kind of moment that lingers quietly, long after the conversation ends, shaping how you approach the world and the people around you. As the sun dipped lower, casting the garden in shades of amber, Peter finally stood. "I should get going," he said, though there was no rush in his movements. "But I hope we can continue talking like this, from time to time." "Of course," I replied warmly. "It's been a pleasure seeing your growth and hearing your thoughts." He nodded, walking down the leaf-strewn path with a measured, steady pace. I stayed on the bench a moment longer, letting the evening sun wash over me. The garden, with its quiet beauty, had become more than a place to sit. It was a space where reflection, understanding, and connection could flourish. As I left, I realized that the series of conversations with Peter had given me something unexpected, a reminder that people, regardless of age, can continue to learn, grow, and form meaningful connections when approached with patience and respect. It was a subtle, gentle revelation, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but quietly transforms the way you perceive the world. And as I walked through the campus toward the exit, the leaves crunching softly beneath my feet, I felt a profound sense of contentment. Life, I thought, has a way of teaching us lessons in the most unassuming ways, through small moments, thoughtful words, and the courage to simply listen and to be heard.